Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to my Let's Talk F1 series where you look through the F1 car launches, obviously today for the Toro Rosso 2019 Challenger, the STR14. Obviously, visually speaking, very simply put, not very different. This year's car is going to go with the same kind of colour scheme as last year. There's some people going to be happy about that, some people not so, I've seen on Twitter and whatnot, but obviously it's a really classic now livery pretty much for the Toro Rosso team. I really enjoyed it ever since they debuted it, that Red Bull Cola kind of vibe, and I didn't really think there was any need for them to really change it that drastically, and so visually speaking, not too much to really say on the matter. But aerodynamically speaking, let's start analysing this car. Now, there are a few changes here and there. It is definitely an evolution of last year's car. There's no major, whoa, what the hell is that kind of moment on the car when you look around it, but there are a few little things here on the Toro Rosso car that kind of allude to maybe them having a bigger area of development maybe for this year's car, and also maybe a lot of teams will have that kind of area of development. So let's go through them simply and analyse this car. So we're going to start off this front view and just simply pointing out the obvious stuff at the very front of the car. Obviously, simple front wing, simple brakes. You'll have every single team not having any kind of fancy appendages or anything like that on the brake ducts themselves, and the front wings all going to be very, very simple. So just pointing the obvious out there. But as we move up through the car, then you can't see it from this angle, but there is some fancier stuff happening with the nose cone. We'll get to that eventually. Nice little S-duct just ahead of the chassis bump where the kind of suspension meets the chassis. And then we get to the middle part of the car, which is probably the most interesting part of this Toro Rosso car. Now, I will fully kind of zone out here, this entire area here, because this entire area of the Toro Rosso car is very barren, very small side pod inlets, very small side pods. So kind of a la taking a hint from the Red Bull car of last year. Obviously, last year Red Bull rocked up with their car, and it was like tiny ass side pods, really tiny inlets, and it looks like Toro Rosso kind of taking the lead from that. Obviously, another year with Honda for Toro Rosso, so I think they have an advantage of, working again closely with the Japanese manufacturers to really tighten up the engine packaging, and no doubt Red Bull will also take a lead in that, and I'm sure Red Bull might even go with even skinnier side pods than we've seen on the Red Bull car, since they did that last year pretty much with what they had with the Renault packaging, so don't be surprised there. But yeah, very open plan side pod kind of arrangement for Toro Rosso, allowing a lot of air to bleed through, obviously, but I think it's also a kind of indication that Toro Rosso are keeping a lot of cards close to their chest, especially this area where you've just got the one single, very simple end plate on the side pod. I think that's going to be rapidly changing throughout pre-season testing. And then also as we get to Australia, I would not be surprised if Toro Rosso start to, have a bit of a more of a three-element kind of prong attachment to that, like Red Bull did last year, because that is very, very simple at the moment. A bit too simple in a way that it's very obvious they're not hiding some stuff, basically, in this area of the car. When we look to the mirrors, Toro Rosso have gone with a similar kind of theme to what Haas did with a two-prong attachment, one overbearing vein across the kind of front face, top of the side pod, and then one small little edge attachment to the top of the side pod area. Again, that kind of upright, deliberately there basically to try and encourage some mixing of the air on the top of the side pod, purely aerodynamically there, obviously, but well within the rules, obviously, not going crazy like Ferrari tried with attachment to the halo. Well within the rules and what they're able to do, but, very much there just to try and mix some air at the top of the side pod to try and get that air suckered on to the top of the side pod face. If you look on the right-hand side here, a bit of a different annotation. You've got a little tiny slot gap actually here on the side of the inlet, so it'd be easy to see from a different angle here, but they've actually got a bit of a housing to the inlet effectively on the outside part here, so they've got a little slot just on the right of the inlet, so that will allow air just to pass straight through, as I've indicated on the arrow. So the advantage there of the little slot, they can, one, channel the air a bit more directly to where they need it to be specifically, and also that smaller slot will accelerate the air effectively and encourage a bit more mixing of the air as it kind of jets through on the exit. So almost like a Ferrari have done on that area of the car. Ferrari have definitely been one of the teams that have most of all played around with little slots that are kind of there within the housing itself, trying to kind of mask it a little bit in that kind of sense. And then on the right hand side again, you've got this very clear slot on the floor on either side. The way the lighting hits it makes it very, very obvious, and this seems to be a big area of development for a lot of the teams really. Last year Ferrari were prominently the ones that really started to go to town on developing this slotted floor kind of concept. From around Baku it was, we really started to see a lot of intricate work on this slotted floor from the Ferrari guys, and then obviously a lot of other teams tried to kind of mimic it at the top end here. So Toro Rosso now going for that big slotted area, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see a bit more few slot gaps towards the end when you get towards the rear tire, try and get that kind of squirt slot gap going on, and that kind of aligns with the kind of small bargeboard intricate work there on the inside face. Moving to a different angle and now looking towards that front end that you couldn't see from the other angle here. So Toro Rosso going with 3 slots in the kind of end fences, I guess you could say, of the nose cone, essentially. Very much like Ferrari copied from last year, which they copied from McLaren, so a lot of copying going on in derivatives, but eventually it makes its way to Toro Rosso here, so allowing air to pass through, cuts a bit of drag, and also they can try and aim a little bit more neatly towards these underarm veins that you've got, I've highlighted just underneath the suspension arms, and there you've got this little triangle slot for where the air is going to come in for that S-duct they've got. They've got a lot of work to do. They've had to kind of up the actual S-duct profile to try and jet it over this kind of big bump they've got on the chassis, which is where I imagine the kind of springs of the suspension are kind of there, and so they're going to have to try and jet that across, but obviously the S-duct taking air from this and putting it to the top, trying to inject some air and get some mixing on top of the chassis. As we move on to the middle of the car, the halo, for now at least in this rendering, doesn't have any of the veins they had from last year. Looks like they have maybe a tiny little under vein on the halo, but on the top end they're very blank. I don't know if they're going to add to that later on in pre-season testing. That remains to be seen. And then this middle part here of the side pod, they've got a bit of a housing going on here, which is difficult to kind of see, but you can see this clear kind of boxed off shape compared to what would usually be obviously a side pod, nice curved edge. So they've got this kind of shrouding almost over the inlet there to allow that slot, which you can't see from this angle, to go through and jet some air through. And the actual inlet itself is actually a lot deeper than when the front face starts off with. So a lot like Red Bull, really tiny inlets, really suckered in side pod areas to try and get the maximum amount of air moving through to the rear end of the car. A little bit of detailing on the very bottom end of the barge board. The barge boards themselves are actually quite simple, so I would suspect they're all, again, like with these end plates, they're hiding a lot for the pre-season testing and the actual Australian Grand Prix upgrades in terms of like that. So I think you're going to be seeing a few more developments. Of course, for pre-season testing, I will be doing a few videos for pre-season to update you guys on any upgrades for all the teams, in fact, so we'll keep you updated on that. But you can see I've tried to kind of highlight the geometric shaping of the side pods, because a lot like last year, like I said, like Red Bull, very suckered in side pods there, so good work from Honda and Toro Rosso working in unison, and that's why I suspect Red Bull, they might have a very aggressive design, because obviously we know how aggressive Red Bull like to go anyway, let alone having a kind of, you know, proper works partnership with their engine manufacturer. And then from this angle, again, you can see a bit better the two-pronged attachment from the mirror, and then one simple little vortex generator on the top, which is going to create a little vortex spiraling off from the edge, which will encourage mixing on the top of the side pod. And then get to the rear wing, obviously the very simplified rear wing. No longer can you have these streaks on the top to bleed pressure through, but Toro Rosso appear to have a bit more of a simplified approach to the McLaren style of overhanging appendages on the rear wing. Haas copied McLaren with a bit more of an aggressive way. Toro Rosso appear to only have 2 streaks on that rear end, but a lot of teams now, because Ferrari copied McLaren last year, now you've got Haas and Toro Rosso copying that style, so that's going to be, I assume, probably maybe a very popular feature for a lot of teams, really, on that rear wing, because that's the next best thing they can do, really, in terms of helping airflow bleed down towards the bottom end of the actual rear floor. And then going from a side-on profile, you can really start to see a bit of a better angle, again, of the mirror attachment, and actually this arm that extends outwards to the actual top of the side pod. They've actually cut it in a way where the only bottom corner attaches to the actual top of the side pod there. So they, in effect, create another vortex generator that, when it attaches, the way it attaches, the shape of it, is effectively another kind of vortex generator device they can use. And then again here, just showing off how small these side pods are, because this is pretty much where the inlet, the bottom of the inlet is. So you can see this massive amount of undercut space they've got on the side pod to try and encourage air to come through from the sides and bulge out through and keep attached as it goes down to the car. And I kind of imaginarily, I feel like that's where the inlet kind of shape is. So that's the kind of size and scale they've got. But here, just showing off, they've got a very simplistic 3-pronged barge board. I imagine this is going to very much change in pre-season, because they've got a bit of space here to work with here, because the new rules actually allow the barge boards to continue a little bit more, because they've on purpose, the FI basically boxed off this area which you're not allowed to develop in, but they've increased the kind of length away towards the front end of the car where they can develop. So the barge board can actually come out to about here, I would say, and so they've got a lot of area to work with. So I think they've oversimplified it on purpose. And then as we move on to the end of the car, like I said, the McLaren style overhanging, but whereas if you watch my Haas video, you would have seen they went with a very aggressive, about, 6 or 8 streaks here, whereas Toro Rosso have only gone for simply 2 little overbearing kind of overhangs in this kind of crease of the rear wing there, and then the rest of it is pretty standard bleeding air with these little slots to the bottom where the diffuser would be. And then finally, from a different angle of the car from the right-hand side, just with a bit of different lighting, it lets you see the 3 holes on the nose cone a little bit easier, with also the S-duct nose and again that S-duct exit. And then here again showing you the kind of housing you've got, and then from this angle you can see what I mean by you've got all this space from where the actual inlet is. So definitely a bit of a shrouding kind of effect going on. And again, 1 vortex generator, 2 with the way they kind of attached it, and then here on the 3-way just confirming Toro Rosso gone for the kind of, I think they had this last year probably, the 2 different wastegates on either side and not stacked on top like Haas did. So that is pretty much all the analysis I can give on the Toro Rosso. Of course, I might have missed 1 or 2 here things there. Of course, I'm no expert. I'm just a engineering graduate trying to give you guys a little bit of insight here. But the Toro Rosso, clearly a bit of an evolution of last year's car, and very much so leaving off some stuff to be imagined for pre-season testing Australia. So like I said, I will update you guys. So if you are new around here, do get subscribed, because I will be making videos of not only every single car when they launch, but also in pre-season testing. And if there's any major updates to aerodynamics of these cars, I will be updating you guys with some videos inside pre-season testing. So do get subscribed for that. But guys, if you did enjoy the video and found it informative, then be sure to hit that like button for me. Let me know what you think about the Toro Rosso, not aerodynamically, but also just livery-wise. I know some people are going to be maybe disappointed, or, perfectly fine with the way they've kept the livery the same way. But either way, let me know in the comments below. Finally, again, if you're on your own idea, do get subscribed for weekly F1 content. I'm aarava. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.